Hey everybody, Dr. Adam Harcourt here, and today we're going to talk about the fourth factor of migraine, the neurological side of it. Now, I want to make the distinction that there's kind of two neurological sides to migraine. And the first one is the actual genetically mediated aberrant neurological function. And what all that means is genetically, people with migraine have an alteration in what's called the excitability of a neuron. So the way that, just a little bit of neurophysiology, the way that a nerve communicates or talks to another nerve is through transmission, what's called an action potential. But basically you have a nerve and then it's got a big long tail and it sends an electrical signal down that tail to release some neurotransmitters, and those neurotransmitters get released and they get accepted by other neurons, and that's how everybody talks to each other, right? And so the way that you actually release that electrical signal is through what's called depolarization. So the inside of a cell is negatively charged. And it has to stay negatively charged in order to allow it to come to threshold, create this what's called action potential, and then go back to resting. And what happens in migraine is that resting potential is closer and closer to threshold. Threshold being what it takes to actually fire off that nerve. And so instead of being at, say, let's say negative 75 millivolts, well, in a migraine patient, that's going to be closer and closer to zero, right? So it's going to be negative 70 or negative 65 or negative 60. And the reason for that is in pretty much every migraine case, there's a genetic problem with what are called ion channels. And the ion channels are just what keep the cell negative. So it allows, say, potassium or sodium or calcium to go in and out. And think of it kind of like a leaky net. If that net gets holes in it, well, now things are flowing out faster than they could, and you're not able to keep that cell negative. And so the genetically mediated neurological problem is those cells are not able to stay as negative as they're supposed to. They become what's called hyperexcitable, and that's what leads to the migraine. So that's the little bit surface level version of what's going on from the neurophysiological side. The other side of the neurological dysfunction is pretty much what we talk about in most of our videos and posts, which is stress to the brain. So let's say that you're little and you're riding your bike and you fall off and boom, you knock your head. Well, the good news is you're little, so you're probably going to heal pretty well. The bad news is it's going to cause some sort of stress to the brain. Now, let's say you're older and you have a concussion playing football, or you get in a car accident, or you wake up one day, you turn over and the world starts spinning because you get vertigo. All of those things are stressors on the brain. They cause the brain to work a little bit harder to do its job. And so the brain's main job is to know where you are in space and where space is in regards to you. And the problem with knocking your head or getting vertigo or having certain sicknesses that cause problems or inflammation in the brain is it affects those areas that tell you where you are in space. So you have what's called your proprioceptive system in your muscles, your vestibular system in your ear, and then your visual system. And if any of those systems disagree, well, now your brain doesn't know where you're at, and so it's going to do things like lock down your neck muscles or make you nauseous so you don't move very fast, or cause you to have headaches to keep you, again, from moving too much. And so when you have this dysfunction, the brain wants to know where the heck you're at, so it's going to do things that inhibit your movement, but it's also going to do things that use more of your resources to figure out where you are in space. So instead of, for example, remembering a phone number or memorizing that test that you're supposed to be studying for, your brain, again, is trying to figure out where the heck you are, and so it's utilizing those resources for other things, and it just stresses the brain out. And so what you have to do is reduce the discrepancy between where your body is and where your brain thinks your body is. And so there's tons of different ways you can do that, whether it's head-eye vestibular rehab or neuro-ophthalmology type exercises or peripheral nerve stimulation or vestibular rehab. All these different things can help out, but they have to be specific to you. So one thing that I find that most migraine patients actually haven't done is this specific neurological rehab for whether it's migraine, post-concussion, post-trauma. All of those things can be contributing to migraine and causing you to have more and more. Now, if we go back to the original problem, which is that neurological dysfunction, that you have areas that are just not as stable, well, here's the good news. Even if you have ions that are leaking out faster than they should, the best way to create a negative environment in the cell is to produce more proteins. How do we produce more proteins? You stimulate those areas of the brain. So say it's the part of the brain that processes light and sound and close eye movements, or it inhibits pain in the face. Well, all of those areas are kind of in that upper brainstem. Now you can do things that stimulate that part of the upper brainstem, produce more proteins, lower the probability that it's going to have a problem, which ultimately lowers your probability that you're going to have migraine. So I know some of these concepts can seem kind of confusing. This is why I go into this pretty extensively in the book. So if you're more curious about learning about this at a deeper level, you can learn about that in our book, Mastering Migraine. But hopefully this gave you a good idea of the fact that just because you've tried all these other things that, again, contribute to migraine, the neurological cause is something that is almost always overlooked, and is something that we find makes a profound difference, not only in reducing migraine, but then keeping those migraines down over a much longer period of time. I hope this was really helpful. If you have any questions, please comment below, because I know I threw a lot at you there. And if you can really understand and master this, it's going to profoundly change the way that you address your own migraine and reduce the amount of days that you're having.